And we move on to our next debate. The next debate on the agenda is Bolivia and the arrest of former President Jeanine Áñez and other officials. And our first speaker is López Gil, Mr. López Gil. 2 minutes, please.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, President. I wish to speak out against the inaction of the EEAS and the High Representative for failing to speak out about the arrest of former President Jeanine Áñez and other members of her government. She was subject to false accusations of offences of terrorism, sedition and conspiracy. All she had done was take over as caretaker, interim president in December 2019 because she was vice president of the Senate, and this was in accordance with Article 169 of the Constitution of Bolivia. This dialogue was supported by the Episcopal Conference of Bolivia, the EU and the Kingdom of Spain. The foreign minister of the time, Mr Borrell, did send the ambassador as a special envoy. Free, fair and transparent elections were organised with due diligence despite the COVID situation, and the mass party took power without any further difficulties. This arrest is a violation of the principle of innocent until proven guilty and the principle of independence of the judiciary, respect for guarantees and due process. It appears to be a political retaliation orchestrated as a result of Morales leaving the country having failed to cling on to power. The separation of powers does not exist in Bolivia, patently, so the former president needs a fair trial. Ms Áñez and the other detainees subject to such false accusations should not spend another minute in prison. It is a flagrant violation of their human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. López Gil. Our next speaker is Mr. López. 1 minute and a half.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, President. Now, the conservatives and the extreme right have said that it's necessary to have some sort of very strong resolution, a heavily politicized resolution on Libya, and that ought to be tabled today. And in our view, this creates great inconsistency, asking for a separation of powers when, in other words, what ought to be done as concerns the separation of powers. And I feel that there is no proper respect for separation of powers, although that has been brought out. And of course, there are different political and ideological factors as well. So I think that the Parliament here damages its credibility with a text like this. Of course, there are agreements between the left, the center, and the right, and that takes place when there is, of course, proper deliberation in order to achieve a consensus. The progressive forces, I understand that they want to emit the most important message possible, that you have to have due process, rule of law. And it seems that this is not taking place. Of course, right now there is no proper respect for rule of law, not even here in this chamber as concerns this particular case. We do need consensus. We do need harmony and non-politicizing of this particular discussion of the case of Bolivia. We do not need to politicize it. Thank you.
Bauza Diaz, 1 minute and a half, please.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, President. Luis Arce got a clear mandate from the people of Bolivia some months ago to get Bolivia out of the economic, health and political crisis that had been paralysing the country for more than a year. But President Arce showed that his only priority was not the people of Bolivia. The first thing he did was imprison former President Áñez and act in an arbitrary fashion. It's not revenge that Mas is looking for to cover up the corruption of Morales and his international partners. There has also been an immediate shelving of an investigation into embezzlement of public funds, which had gone to a Spanish company called Neurona. So the government of Bolivia is trying to cover up that international plot that had been increasing instability and populism right across Latin America. And curiously, it involves Pablo Iglesias directly, an international ally of different dictatorships in Latin America. And curiously, for some weeks now, he's also been deputy leader of Spain. We are seeing other organizations and other international mandates, the Organization of American States, the US government and other organizations want democracy, transparency and for human rights and international law to be respected for the people of Bolivia. So I encourage you all to join our call that former President Áñez be freed as soon as possible. We don't need more revenge and corruption in Bolivia. What we need is reconciliation and justice.
Mr. Solé, 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorprende que tengamos...
Surprised that this particular debate is here as a debate as on this particular part of the agenda concerning violations of human rights. And I do question, when are we going to have a debate about fundamental human rights and rule of law in Spain, for example? Because there we have political prisoners and we have politicians who have had to leave the country, not because a coup, but because of a referendum. So the urgency of this particular debate, well, I'd like to reinforce it that we have a number of Catalans in prison right now, political prisoners there for 30 to 13 years. And there is nobody that can in any way justify this particular situation. So, and I think it's quite hypocritical indeed for we to deliver lessons on human rights to other countries right now. Now, as far as the narrative that in 2019 that there was electoral fraud, that Madam Áñez had to take over to save the country and that Evo Morales left on his own will. No, that's not what took place. There was a forced change of power with the complicity of the military. It was a coup. So I think indeed this has to be understood by all what the situation was. And we had many, many victims because of this repression following the coup d'etat. So the particular arguments that have presented as far as Madam Áñez taking power legitimately is totally inexplainable and fallacious. We've had elections in Bolivia, and the elections have been transparent and clear, the recent elections that took place, and I think it's quite clear that the new government that's in place right now is legitimate, and it is in a position right now to carry out that political reconciliation that is necessary, and it is indeed totally out of place for us to criticize that particular process right now. Thank you very much.
Mr. Terch, 1 minute, please.
Curioso golpe de Estado.
This rather odd coup occurred to prepare some elections that everyone says were clean, that they were supervised by the church, by the EU, by the neighbouring countries, the OAS and so on. Some elections were organised. There was a handover of power that was all fine and above board, and it was handed over to the opposition. Is that what you call a coup? Well, if only coups were like that. That wasn't a coup, it was fraud, and it was stopped. The people of Bolivia heroically stopped the fraud, stopped the usurper who had been violating the constitution constantly, and now they're trying to use the coup narrative to silence the people, silence the opposition, create a narco-communist regime like Morales's, like the Venezuelan one, and like the one that they're trying to create with the Sao Paulo Forum with cocaine. It's cocaine money that they're using to try to take control of the whole of Latin America.
Mr. Pineda, 1 minute and a half, please.
Thank you very much, President. On the 20th of October 2019, there were presidential elections in Bolivia, elections where we had an impeccable electoral process. President Morales was re-voted in. Those people who are out there and declared that there were false elections, these were simply lies and fake news propagated by the right. And involved in all of that were the police forces and a number of different other law enforcement agencies. Evo Morales had to leave the country, and Madam Áñez took over with a minority party with the support of the military. After the violent coup d'etat and the usurping of power by Madam Áñez, we had numerous different mobs circulating throughout the country, terrorizing in conjunction with military authorities, with the police as well, terrorizing peasants, that is to say, in order to bolster the support and in order to prop up this fake government. So I would like to express the solidarity that we all ought to express for all of those peasants that were killed, that were massacred in the course of this usurping of power that took place with the installation of Madam Áñez to power. Now, I think we ought to ask quite clearly, what type of government is there right now? Right now, there is a legitimately elected government, and I would like to say, Viva Bolivia.
Half of political groups, we start with the EPP, and our next speaker is Mr. Kelly. 1 minute, please.
Firstly, I would like to praise the people of Bolivia. They are resilient people. They have great values. We have a responsibility. We need to control power in Bolivia. Áñez was arrested and some of her officials without any reason. That goes against any proper law. I urge the Bolivian government to stop this. There is no contract between Bolivia and the European Union at the moment. In terms of the GSP Plus negotiations, we need a democratic society in Bolivia, and this would be good for the economy and for trading between us. We need reporting, and this needs to be addressed urgently. Thank you very much.
On behalf of S&D, Mrs. Leitão Marques, 1 minute, please.
Thank you, President. Contrary to what some people appear to be insinuating, it is not easy to resolve a situation which started with a turbulent election and opaque transfer of power. But fortunately, Bolivia does seem to have come out the other side, as we see from the 2020 presidential elections and the recent regional elections. It is not enough, though, for the electoral process to occur in a normal fashion. It is necessary for all political forces to respect the rules of democracy and for the government of Bolivia to ensure that rule of law is being complied with, ensuring access to justice and the opportunity for a defence, especially when accusations are of a political nature. Political peace and the stability of the Bolivian regime are values for which we should stand up and speak out. So I call on the External Action Service and all member states to increase their efforts to support dialogue between the parties in Bolivia so that we can ensure that this occurs. Thank you.
On behalf of Renew, Mrs. Bilbao Barandica, 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much, President. Bolivia needs to restore the confidence among the various political groups, get rid of polarization, and resolve its problems through negotiation and dialogue. We need, of course, the participation of international organizations, but we need minimum conditions for success. In the case of Bolivia, the situation is one of an explosive nature, and we do have to have very, very delicate use of these various intermediaries. We have to take into consideration the military, the role that it's played there as well. Now, the elections of 2020, of course, we have to take a look at that again. It has to be revisited, the results of that. International organizations can contribute with transparency to clarify all of the various problems that have existed, the allegations of fraud as well, electoral fraud that is to say, and reestablish confidence, not divide, but provide all that is necessary to bring people together, and also to get rid of those particular elements that feed reactionary approaches. And of course, fighting poverty is one of the key issues in dealing with the foundation, the cause of the problem overall. Thank you.
CR, Mr. Czarnecki. 1 minute, please.
Panie Przewodniczący, Panie Komisarzu, Szanowni Państwo, czemu Unia Europejska...
Commissioner, President, dear colleagues, the European Union is apparently interested in Bolivia. We in the European Union are the guarantor of the peace agreement in 2019 and 2020. The representative of the European Union was able to supervise the situation in this country. For all of these reasons, there is a moral obligation to stand on the side of the former president and her two ministers and the political institutions under attack because they respected their constitutional duties and took their office. I think the European Union needs to clearly make an outcry, helping this country in economic and humanitarian point of view, but we can't close our eyes to the reality. I am convinced that there are people in this parliament who clearly would speak in favor for the release of Mrs. Áñez. Thank you.
Mrs. Santos, 1 minute, please.
Bolivia is still going through a very delicate period in political and social terms. But since last year's elections, all national and international stakeholders are in a position to play a role to help it return to normal democracy. The violence that we saw in 2019 should be scrutinised and judged within the judicial system, with independence and without any pressure being brought by politicians. The complete separation of powers is a fundamental principle of rule of law. This needs to be respected in order for Bolivia to be able to achieve social reconciliation. social and political polarisation is very dangerous, and it leads to further divisions and a lack of credibility of the institutions. All Bolivians who respect the rule of law and all member states should provide support for a process of constructive, reconciliatory national dialogue.
Vice President Charanzová, 1 minute, please.
We all hoped that the last elections in Bolivia would mark an end to the problems that existed, that it would be positive and reinstate peace in a divided country. But the opposite has happened. With horror, we have seen political persecution. It's clear that the presidential succession in 2019 was constitutional. The European Union supported the Organization of American States Observers and the conclusions that they came to. The coup of Luis Arce has put together a judicial mechanism which has little to do with rule of law. So we call for the immediate release of the former president, Madam Áñez, and the ministers as well. We call for independent legal procedure. Bolivians want and deserve stability, and above all, they deserve peace. The European Union ought to play a role in accompanying and escorting Bolivia along this process towards democracy. Thank you.
Now I give the floor to Commissioner Varhey. Mr. Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Mr. President, honorable members, as you know well, Bolivia saw a volatile, tense and confrontational period after the failed 2019 October general elections. The elections held in October 2020, which were carried in a peaceful, transparent and credible manner, provide the foundation for a more constructive political landscape. The Movimiento al Socialismo, MAS, won the elections with 55%, and Luis Arce became president. His vice president, David Cochequana, conveyed messages of openness for reconciliation in the country. There have been initial positive signals, but the country remains polarised, with various obstacles to reconciliation and democratic stability. The HRVP, Josep Borrell, has publicly called for the accusations against Mrs. Áñez and the ministers linked to the events of 2019 to be dealt within the framework of a fair and transparent judicial process, with full independence, without political pressure, and with full respect for the division of the powers. The EU delegation in La Paz is in close contact with Mrs. Áñez's family, as well as with the temporary mission of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights that visits Mrs. Áñez regularly in the prison. We have reiterated our on various occasions to the Bolivian authorities that the former president should receive appropriate medical attention. The EU has been fully engaged in support of Bolivian efforts towards reconciliation and stability. It was in this spirit that the EU acted as a neutral facilitator over the past 18 months to encourage national actors to reach an agreement that would lead to the transparent and democratic elections in 2020. We had the honour to be invited, and we accompanied these elections with a reinforced election experts mission, adding up to our support for the democratic electoral process in the country. Dear members, Bolivia needs to address urgent challenges such as overcoming the pandemic and economic recovery. The EU will continue to support the country by promoting dialogue for reconciliation, involving all relevant actors, monitoring developments in the country and providing support to the promotion of democracy, rule of law and human rights in Bolivia, as these are fundamental principles of the EU and of interest to all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. The debate is closed. The vote will be held today.